He did what he does.
Competition breeds high stakes and desperate people, willing to do whatever it takes to win. That's especially true in sports. And so today, we're talking about 10 rigged moments in the NBA.
Prigioni does not look to shoot very often.
Number 10. First game flop of 2012. One of the best and worst ways to cheat in basketball is to do the dreaded act of flopping. Flopping is a term within the sport that is essentially an intentional fall or stagger by a player after little or no physical contact by an opposing player to draw a personal foul call by an official against the opponent. This move is also known as acting. And in the first game of the New York Knicks versus Miami Heat in 2012, this move was so prevalent that it was nicknamed Flopfest 2012. One of the worst offenders of it in this specific game was a legendary figure, LeBron James, even getting called out by other players such as Klay Thompson, Patrick Patterson, and Coach Jeff Van Gundy on Twitter. By the second quarter, it was obvious to anyone that the Knicks had no winning shot, and that game looked to be rigged against them.
They're quicker to the basketball. If you're dressed in green, you got to find a way.
Number 9, 2010 NBA Finals. At number 9, we have another example of a rigged game because of a more famous player was involved. That game would be Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals. And that famous player would happen to be the late Kobe Bryant. Bryant's shooting was some of the worst they had ever seen, from both the player and the game in general within that season. He only shot 6 of the 24 hoops within that game. But like any established and knowledgeable player, he tried to get to the free throw line. And he did. More than likely, because he was so established and famous, he ended up getting all the calls for it. He was able to go to the free throw line no less than 15 times. His team of the Los Angeles Lakers ended up winning, and Bryant himself won Finals MVP. Stealing from everyone's guess was going to be Paul Gasol. Many are speculative on whether there is enough evidence to say this game was rigged. But one thing is clear, the Lakers certainly did have an easier time of everything due to their Kendrick Perkins being benched due to an injury.
Garnett had been hurting him with the face-up, had scored.
Number 8, while being in the past, seems to be very similar to this. Number 8, 1988 NBA Finals. Games within the finals always are filled with desperation, but this one seemed especially bad. Mostly in the refs' calls department. It was nicknamed the Phantom Foul. It was the 6th game of the Detroit Pistons versus the Los Angeles Lakers. And it was in the very last moments where the Pistons led the Lakers by only a singular point. The ball was fed to Lakers Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, while Pistons Bill Laimbeer would post up, and Laimbeer would go for a skyhook, and the refs fouled him. Something nicknamed the Phantom Foul. A foul that technically Laimbeer couldn't even reach. A foul allowed Kareem to make 2 free throws and let the Lakers win and become the official 1988 champions. And why did most people think this was rigged? Because at the time, Bill Laimbeer was rumored to be one of the most hated men in the NBA. At that same time, Kareem was named one of the 5 best players at the time.
About 48.
Number 7, Orlando Magic and the 1993 lottery. The draft lottery is, by all accounts, supposed to be a legitimate lottery. However, it was extraordinary and suspicious when the Atlanta Magic had won the draft lottery in 1992 and drafted Shaquille O'Neal as a first pick in 1992 draft. Magic was an expansion team founded in 1989, and yet the rest of the expansion teams of the late 1980s were still struggling. The league saw a team that could be competitive in Magic if only missing one last player to make them undefeatable. And that is why many people think the 1993 draft lottery might have been rigged when Magic won it. They only had a 1.5% chance of winning and should have been even slimmer after winning the year before. But yet, they did it once again. And they went on to draft Chris Webber, who they later traded away for the famous Penny Hardaway. 2 years later, Magic competed in the 1995 finals with heavyweights like Shaq and Hardaway. While drafting lottery cheating to get famous players may be one thing, you might be surprised to hear how an iconic face of basketball was said to have had a championship game rigged for his fame.
Scottie Pippen.
Boy, a high underhand.
Number 6, Michael Jordan's last shot. In some of the final moments of the 6th game of the Chicago Bulls versus Utah Jazz, Michael Jordan ended his career with 6 NBA rings. However, the game wasn't exactly falling in his favor. Jordan had scored a layup with 40 seconds remaining to take the lead from Jazz. The ball was put on Jazz's best player at the time, Karl Malone. But under some strange calls that seemed to benefit Jordan mostly, Malone was stripped of the ball. Jordan was able to bypass and shove Jazz's Byron Russell without so much as a foul and that final 5-second iconic jump dunk through the net. The Bulls won the championship and the legacy of Michael Jordan lived on. There aren't too many Jordan dissenters calling the seemingly cheated championship out, but there are a few who are at least say that the refs' calls, or lack thereof, seem to be rigged against the Utah Jazz.
Jordan looking for his 24th point, draws the contact, and he may very well get it at the line.
Number 5. The 1999 Eastern Conference Finals. As the playoff of 1999 was, miraculously, the New York Knicks had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. This is where they would play their dreaded rival, the Indiana Pacers. Within the series, the two teams were tied at 1 game apiece. The third game was going to be the ultimate deciding factor. It was the fourth quarter, and the Knicks were down by 3 points. Somehow, like in our number 6, Larry Johnson launched a 3-pointer in those final few seconds. This shot has been highly contested, even though it had gone in. Where some people start to say this game was rigged is what happened next. While Johnson was making this shot, the ref called the Pacers Antonio Davis had fouled him. Davis was shown to touch Johnson, let alone foul him barely. This gave Johnson the chance to have a free throw that ended up winning the finals for the Knicks.
Effort by Camby. This is where he's really very good in shutting down the middle.
Number 4. 2006 NBA Finals calls. Like many of the numbers on this list, this next moment is in the season's finals. The season finals of any basketball season are always fraught with high emotions, and the 2006 finals are no exception. To so very many, these finals have been called out as a rigged game. A rigged game where the NBA is simply trying to make the most money. So what happened in these finals? Well, in the Final Four series of the game, the Miami Heat's Dwayne Wade somehow was called and able to shoot an average of 18 free throws per game. Heat were the ones to win the Final 4 games of the series, but many only saw the wins as only results of the refs' called free throws. The worst example within this series was said to be in the 6th game. This game was the Miami Heat versus Dallas Mavericks. Wade was making a shot, but in the process, he ended up elbowing Mavericks Dirk Nowitzki in the face. However, instead of giving Wade the offensive foul that would allow Nowitzki the free throw, Wade was given that very same throw. This caused the Heat to go on and win the championship. Our next number has nothing to do with any calls to win games, but more calls to win certain players.
With the foul. Wade gets inside, finding O'Neal, and Shaquille O'Neal banks
Number
it
3, canceled Chris Paul trade. In 2011, the New Orleans Hornets agreed to a 3-team trade sending player Chris Paul to the Los Angeles Lakers. Dell Demps, the Hornets general manager of the time, had made a very complex deal with this trade. It involved Paul and Paul Gasol, who would be traded to the Houston Rockets. He would get Lamar Odom, Kevin Martin, Goran Dragic, Luis Scola, and a lottery draft first-round pick. During his time, the NBA owned the Hornets and so had to follow the league's rulings, and these rulings could notify any trades. When the league's commissioner, David Stern, vetoed the trade, that certainly nullified the overall trade. Many believe that was a decision rigged so that the league could keep more of the competitive balance among all of the teams under their banner, even though they had let other teams form together to be undefeated before. Number 2, Draymond Green, suspended in the 2016 NBA Finals. We get back to the situations that seemed rigged for the more famous players who made the NBA the most money. In the 2016 Finals, with the game between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors, many considered such a rigged situation for the said famous player, especially since that happened to be one of the faces of basketball, LeBron James. James and the Cavaliers were losing left and right and going down 3-1 in the 2016 Finals. James was supposed to be carrying the team, which would make any player desperate. Desperate enough, he decided to bait bad boy and Golden State Warriors player Draymond Green in the 4th game. Green was on thin ice and was only 1 foul away from being suspended. Unfortunately, Green fell for the bait and the league suspended him, siding with the famous James despite the obvious bait.
James closes to the opposite corner. Love pulls the trigger onto Green.
Number 1, 2016 Western Conference Finals. Finally, we get to what is the most widely considered rigged moment in recent NBA history. that being the 2016 Western Conference Finals. As mentioned in number 2, we already had one bad situation sitting in the general finals, but this was considered even worse in the hindsight. What made it worse, that the NBA was even as secretive about it as the rest of the numbers on this list. They even displayed it on social media. They announced the 7th game of the finals between the Golden State Warriors and Oklahoma City Thunder. However, they also announced for the same day and time the first game of the general finals between, again, the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. This looked incredibly rigged because the Golden State Warriors had not yet won the Western Conference. By announcing these games simultaneously, people were led to believe that this double posting was an accidental reveal that the Western Conference was fixed for the Warriors to win. An obviously bad situation that ever was proven completely true would utterly destroy the entire league's reputation, and what is considered the worst rigged situation to happen in NBA history. So what did you think? Which incident did you think was the worst? And what would you have done in their shoes? Let us know down in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell for more content like this. We'll see you next time.